Whipped. Oh, that was brutal. Yo. What?
Me, personally. Now, how about Darksiders 3? We'll just have to wait until the game launches on November 27th to find out. Until then,
Hey there, everyone, and a very special welcome back to the Derp Den. As the 10 of you may recall, I first started this channel back in 2018 to celebrate the announcement of Darksiders 3. Now, since then, I procrastinated on making this video. Initially, I didn't really care for Darksiders 3. I'll get into detail about why later, but for now, I'll say this. I was incredibly disappointed by this game. It took directions that I actively disliked, and its combat felt off. It wasn't until last year that I decided to revisit the game. I had gotten a job, and it was really hard to find the time to make videos. Well, recently I've lost my job, so I've been having to live off of DoorDash since then. I figure since I've got a bit more free time and a more flexible schedule now, it would be a good time to get back into the swing of things. But you might be wondering why I chose to start my channel again with Darksiders 3. Well, I saw this review on it. You get the gist of it when you see the reviews that I did manage to find. The biggest complaint I see is that this game is too much like Dark Souls. It's like Dark Souls. It's too difficult.
God fucking forbid games don't hold your hand.
Now, I feel like this goes without saying, but this isn't actually why the game is disappointing. The game isn't trying to pander to Dark Souls fans, nor is it trying to alienate its fans. Games that end up alienating its fan base don't do so intentionally, and this game is no different. Is it a disappointing game that alienated its fan base? Yes. Did it mean to do so? Of course not. So I decided to go back and this time actually bother to review the game properly and put this series to rest. Believe it or not, I was actually rather bothered by the fact that I hadn't actually finished this series, so here I am now, finishing what I started nearly 2 full years later. Thanks for tuning in, and if all you care about is a score, I'll go ahead and start with this. I actually highly recommend playing this game. It's actually a really good game now, and is definitely worth the price tag it has. If you're going to play this game, I recommend using classic combat with the difficulty set to challenging. Anything lower is too easy, to be completely honest, and anything higher is too hard. I feel like challenging was the perfect balance, making death a threat while preventing the game from one-shotting you like it does in Apocalyptic. And if you're enjoying what you're watching, maybe give that subscribe button a smash and hit that like button too. I don't know, that's just what I'm supposed to say here, that's what I've got in the script. With that said, let's get started!
素直に I love you 届けようきっと You love me 伝わるさ君に似合うガラスの靴を探そう二人で Step and Go いつまでも深夜12時を過ぎたって君は僕の愛しい24時間シンデレラダメダメダメよダメなのよあんたが好きで好きすぎてどれだけ強いお酒でも歪まない思い出がバカみたい
Construct a universe teeming with imperfection, misery, sin. Among the scholars of both heaven and hell, this query is known as the riddle of sorrows.
The story picks up right after the tutorial for the very first game. This game actually takes place before the first game, but also takes place simultaneously with the second. They just give us a proper sequel? Wars in Chains and the Charred Moai Head summon Fury for a special assignment, all for her. The 7 deadly sins. No, not those sins. Not those either. I don't think I could handle fighting Meliodas.
Full counter!
Yeah, these sins. They task Fury with this for literally lack of any better options. War's been put in timeout, Death is doing fuck all, and Strife is on a top secret mission we don't know anything about. Stay tuned for Darksiders 4, where we no doubt learn about that, only to finally pick up after the first game with Darksiders 5. Fury agrees to hunt the 7 deadly on one condition. She gets to be leader of the group upon completion of her mission, whatever that means. And they take that about as well as you could expect.
If you would trade obedience for a title, so be it. But never make a demand upon us, horseman. You depart immediately.
So Fury is sent to post-apocalyptic Earth, where she adventures about to find the 7 deadly and asks them very, very nicely to return to their imprisonment. To do that, she'll need the help of Volgrim to supply her with various supplies, and Ulthane, who will improve her gear.
The Earth never ceases to impress with its variety of abominations.
The gameplay of Darksiders 3 is actually the first in the series to introduce multiple modes of combat. Initially, the game only launched with one, and it was a more methodical style of combat that forced you to stop what you were doing if you wanted to use any items or heal. Additionally, it made the window for perfect dodges incredibly narrow, and this is where most of the backlash actually comes from. Enemies, even on the easier difficulties, dealt some serious damage, and the windows for dodging were very strict, making even the easiest difficulties a chore to get through, especially since some save points can be fairly far from where you died. Now, a couple of months after the game release, they added a classic mode for combat, which widened the dodge windows, allowed you to use items while moving, and increased the speed of attacks. Additionally, they nerfed the damage enemies did in the easier difficulties, and it was this initial launch that turned longtime fans away from the game. So, to be fair, it's only after those updates the game gets better. The game, like its predecessors, is an action-adventure title emphasizing brutal combat. There's been a few changes, however, as there's no longer a way to execute enemies. This is a shame that I am very thankful for, as I never really found myself using the execute options very often. I would either not bother, or enemies would die too fast for me to be able to execute them, so I'm actually glad they removed that option entirely. You journey through a post-apocalyptic Earth, following the compass to the next sin. In theory, you should be able to kill any sin in any order, but in all of my playthroughs, I found myself beating all of the sins in the exact same order, with the exception of my challenging difficulty clear, as I decided to abandon the area I was in and fight Wrath again, which was cool. Unfortunately, I beat all the other sins in the exact same order, which was disappointing. Especially since I'm a fan of Breath of the Wild, which allowed players to beat the game in any order they saw fit. You could even go straight to Ganon if you wanted. It was disappointing to not be able to do that for this game, but I guess you can't have your cake and eat it too. The game has you beating specific areas, and the paths naturally lead into specific bosses, which if that was what they intended with this more linear pathing, then it works great. However, if they wanted you to be able to beat the game in any order, they needed to design the game around that. Exploration, for the most part, requires specific abilities and power-ups you get by defeating the sins. Each hollow you obtain has two effects. First is a mobility/puzzle-solving ability, utilizing the hollow's unique characteristic, and a secondary weapon that you can weave into your combats for more open-ended combat. Additionally, each hollow also has their own special spell that you can use in exchange for a full bar of wrath. There are 4 that you can obtain. The Flame Hollow, which gives you an AoE dot for the spell's duration, and a pair of chains for the secondary weapon, which attack very fast but have low damage. Second is the Thunder Hollow, which gives you a lance and summons 3 tornadoes that attack the nearest enemy for its spell. The Force Hollow, which gives you a hammer that attacks very slowly but deals a ton of damage and can stagger enemies. Very useful for enemies that block a lot. Its spell is that it deals AoE damage and knocks all enemies around you away. Very useful for when you're surrounded. Finally, there's the Stasis Hollow, which gives you dual daggers and makes you temporarily invulnerable to all attacks and slows any enemies that damage you for a portion of your wrath, proportional to the amount of damage you take. Think of it like a Thornmail passive. This makes combat very active, which is actively at odds with the vanilla combat of the game. Who would have thought that slower, methodical combat wouldn't mix well with Darksiders? The game wanted to give players more meaningful fights just getting to the sins, which is where the increased difficulty comes in. Some are like mini-bosses, as well as having proper mini-bosses in the form of the Chosen. As with its predecessors, Darksiders 3 is an adventure game and actively encourages exploration. Its design philosophy is similar to Metroid. Each area is interconnected, and you'll find yourself reaching areas you've already been to while exploring. There are branching paths, some of which require a specific hollow to reach. Exploration is rewarded with something tangible to the player, period. There is no junk collectible in this game. Everything you find is, in some shape or form, tangible to you. You can find various healing items or buffing items, some of which admittedly trivialize some of the fights. You can also find humans that you can send back to Ulthane, which he'll give you a trinket that buffs all of your stats after finding a certain number of humans, and upgrading it further after that. Then there are passive items that you can find that Ulthane can upgrade with angelic or demonic artifacts that you find throughout the world as well. The effects of these trinkets varies on the type. Some increase the amount of souls you collect, some increase your damage, some increase your health. With a Chosen Soul, you can max out the upgrade, unlocking both trees at once too. It's far less broken than Darksiders 2's skill tree, that's for certain. Vulgrim is back once again, and he's hungry for souls. You can find lurcher packs throughout the world, and they'll give you more souls you can trade to Vulgrim for items, upgrade materials, and, most importantly, levels. The number of souls you need in order to level up can get pretty ridiculous, so you need a veritable fuck ton of souls to get levels. When you level up, you get an attribute point that you can allocate to your choice of max HP, physical damage, or magic damage. Me personally, I did 2 levels of physical damage, then 1 level for HP, with the occasional magic up to keep my Havoc form up to damage. Speaking of which, Havoc form has been net nerfed again. They've reworked the form to regen your HP, and it deals a shit ton of damage, but the form doesn't last very long and it's pretty difficult to build up Havoc. There's a trinket that helps with that, but for the vast majority of the game, Havoc is difficult to generate to the point where the form is almost not worth using. I used it in emergency situations, but most of the time I died to the next bullshit mechanic anyway, so it didn't really make a difference if I used it or not. The game emphasizes boss fights to a new level. Each one has unique mechanics and personalities, and interact with Fury in really organic and believable ways. They stay true to their respective sins too. It's honestly the best part.
Much that the humans got right, but they did no art.
What?
Frankly, I think it's one of the reasons that the angels were so jealous of them. Have you ever seen one of those birds paint?
You're talking about art. Now. Here.
It's a museum. Well, certainly, we have our mission.
Like I stated in the story section of this video, this game revolves around Fury capturing each of the 7 deadly sins in exchange for leadership of the 4 horsemen. This game sets the bar very high in main characters, as Fury is actually the best character the franchise has seen. She's a massive improvement from both war and death. She has a personality, she interacts with people in a very believable way, and to top it all off, she has the most amount of development out of each of the games. Seriously, she's almost a different person by the end of the game. It's impressive what 7 years did for the quality of the playable character for this game. She cracks jokes, makes small talk, all while remaining an intimidating person that demands respect. She's honestly amazing, and her design is incredibly unique as well. I honestly don't have anything bad to say, although there was the occasional cringy comment from her, but that's really nitpicking at this point. Alright, spoilers ahead here. If you don't want to be spoiled on the ending of Darksiders 3, now's your chance to skip ahead to the timestamp below. After Fury defeats each of the sins, it comes to light that Watcher, who has been Fury's companion throughout the game, has been the sin Envy the entire time, which raises all sorts of questions for me, which I'll get into later. This game does answer a question that I've had since the first game, and that was, why was War summoned to Earth to begin with? The final seal had never been broken, so why was he sent to Earth? Well, the charred Moai heads are to blame for that. They sent War to Earth, then blamed the ensuing carnage on the Horsemen, all in an attempt to get them out of the picture. Why did they do that? It's not really explained all that well, but if I had to make a guess, it's that they got scared of the humans and sought to get them out of the picture, and they were likewise scared of the Horsemen for their ever-increasing power and self-awareness, so they pinned the blame on them. You go to the Charred Council's chambers one last time to face off against Envy, who, in typical Envy fashion, is using the weapons the other Horsemen have used too. She even summons specters of the other sins for specific attacks, making her fight a joy to play, to be totally honest. After you beat Envy, you piss off the Council one last time and go back to Earth to save what's left of humanity. Fury chooses to travel throughout the universe with humanity, all to protect them until the time comes that they can return home. Roll credits. After you beat the game, you can create an Apocalypse save, which is this game's new Game Plus mode. You carry over your levels, items, and souls. And there are new shadow enemies that can spawn randomly to give you a fight for your life. Now, because of a couple of choices I made in my previous run, I wanted to see what would be different if I made some different choices. So I went ahead and beat the game a second time on Apocalyptic difficulty to find out. What was different? Well, not much to be honest, but I won't say more so that you can find out for yourself. Before you start the final fight, you can continue exploring and fight each of the exceptional mini-bosses the game has to offer. I dare not say more though, since I don't want to spoil anyone here. Darksiders 3 is a conflicting game. On one hand, its initial launch actively discouraged me from playing it, but once they added that classic combat mode, it actually made the game a lot better. It's amazing what just a few changes to the combat did for the quality of the game. With a great combat system, tons of things to find and places to explore, there's a ton of value in this one game. I wouldn't recommend 100% completing it, but that's just me personally. I would give this game a highly recommended rating. Most of the problems that I didn't cover are really just nitpicks, and they don't really impact the quality of the game enough to warrant criticism. If you're a fan of Darksiders, you might be torn with the shift in design philosophy, but ultimately, it's a great game. As I stated before, set the game to challenging difficulty with classic combat, and you'll have a game that's both fun to play and rewarding as well. Now, join me next time when I start my next series. I got something evil planned. And if you liked what you saw, then make sure you subscribe for more reviews, gameplay videos, montages, and more. And be sure to hit that bell icon to be notified of all my future uploads. This has been McDerples, and I'll see you again in the Derp Den.